Our next speaker will be known to many of you. We are going to hear from Mick Napier, who's chair of Scottish PSC. And Mick has also been subject to terrorism charges, and I think on numerous occasions there have been attempts to prevent him from protesting in Scotland and Glasgow and so forth. So welcome to our meeting, Mick. Over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Esther. And thanks to the organisers for this really timely and quality event. Those of us who are really old might have been involved in the campaign against the war in Vietnam, 3 million dead, aggression, genocidal violence. And the meetings were rather small for a very long time, until the university authorities in the USA banned meetings on the subject. And when the issue of free speech became fused with the issue of Vietnam, the movement grew by leaps and bounds. It really was a case of the war coming home, in the sense that it was activity on the ground in the USA and elsewhere that built the movement. But the free speech issue was absolutely central to building the movement against the genocidal invasion of Vietnam. And I think there's lessons there. What we're witnessing is Palestine becoming a major domestic political issue. Now, despite the suffering, my predecessor here spoke about the suffering of her daughter, long-term jailing. And I think these people are the exception to the general rule that the cost of resistance here in Britain is usually relatively minor. Harassment, fines, petty legal pressure, and so on. But this is the exception. And of course, we need to have the slogan, "No one left behind," that we don't leave anyone behind. And it was a salutary lesson in this respect from way back in the massacre of 2009, Cast Lead. As I recall, there were very large angry demonstrations at the Israeli university, the Israeli embassy, sorry, in London, after which many of those who participated returned to normal life. Several months afterwards, they began to be picked up by the police and charged. And if my numbers are correct, I seem to recall that 14 young men were charged with various crimes, all bar one Muslims. And somehow the police managed to isolate them from each other. They didn't even know each other quite often, and persuaded them to plead guilty to the charges against them, promising that if they did so, they could avoid a custodial sentence. Their crimes were serious. It involved throwing a water bottle, a plastic water bottle that many people just put in the bin, against the gates of the Israeli embassy. They all got custodial sentences. And the problem was that because they were not organized together, they had been driven by rage at the Israeli crimes, a stronger defense campaign wasn't possible. So I think the lesson from that is, if we begin to get involved in opposing the genocide, we better be organized, and we better be working together to defend those who are in the crosshairs of the state. I've been charged with, for what it's worth, I've been charged with 3 counts of terrorism. The first one was allegedly supporting Hamas, when I pointed out that Hamas won an election in Gaza, in Palestine, some years ago, and the British government tried to annul it. That was all. The terrorism charges were dropped after a couple of months, when the prosecutors decided that it wasn't worth proceeding with. The current charges involve supporting 2 other terrorist organizations, Palestine Action, who it seems went too far. And I mean, although it was a genocide, they painted an aircraft. They used paint, and this terrible crime has led to them being classed as terrorists. Now, I think being charged with an offence that could lead to 14 years in prison, in my own case, it's always thought crime. I haven't smashed up an aircraft yet. 14 days would be serious. 14 weeks, I would really take very seriously indeed. But 14 years, this is absolutely off the scale of craziness. And a lot of people, the general public, see it. I saw a figure a few days ago that 71% of Labour Party members and supporters, even there, oppose the prescription on Palestine Action. So I think, in a sense, the tide is with us. We get a feeling over the last couple of months that when out campaigning in the streets, the mood has certainly changed. And not just Labour Party members, but right across the board, we see strong opposition to this prescription. And therefore, given that the issue of free speech is utterly fused with the issue of the genocide in Palestine, it creates the conditions for a successful fight back. So my two current charges of terrorism, one is for Palestine Action. I didn't have the courage to wear the Palestine Action t-shirt. We decided to fight on a slightly different hill, and we wore t-shirts that said genocide in Palestine, in big font, time to take action. And Palestine in Action were very prominent. From 10 feet away, it was about Palestine Action. The cops said that anyone who wore that t-shirt would be arrested. And I think this is really dumb on their part. I think they're going to lose. I decided to become a little bit satirical because I had a serious bail condition already. And I changed my t-shirt to say, time to act. So even the word Palestine wasn't on the t-shirt. Now, this isn't as ridiculous as Plasticine Action, but I think the way in which the cops are on such a hair trigger could very well contribute to their downfall, to their undoing going forward. So I guess one other thing to report from up here is that the reason why I think the tide is swimming in our direction is that although the police are still arresting all and sundry, knocks on the door at 1 o'clock in the morning, people being scooped off the street, scores of cops chased the playwright, Paul Laverty, close comrade of Ken Loach, a couple of days ago in Edinburgh, scores of them in order to arrest them. And this makes them look ridiculous. But the authorities up here seem to be having second thoughts. The cops are going full tilt, but the legal authorities have frozen all the prosecutions for the moment. Those people who had bail conditions, being banned from the city centre, for example, and a date to appear in court, they've been told in writing that they have not yet decided whether to prosecute, and there's no date to appear in court, forget about it, and there are no bail conditions. So just get on with your normal life. So it seems that, and the authorities have set up a special condition. They've reined in the prosecutors, who up in Scotland really need to be reined in. I mean, I've spent years in court charged with the terrible crime of saying the words "end the siege of Gaza," or in another case that lasted 3 years, talking about Palestinian blood, which was deemed to be anti-Semitic. So the prosecutors up here have a long history of mounting absolutely crazy prosecutions, which never really had any chance of success, but took years. But now they've been reined in, and the government has set up a system whereby a very senior prosecutor has to okay every prosecution, and that, so not the ordinary men and women in the offices, but even that prosecutor is to be supervised by a special committee of experts. I don't know if it's 3 or 5, but that committee of experts will be, they'll be needed to endorse any prosecution that relates to Palestine Action, and I think terrorism accusations in general. So on the one hand, the cops are not slowing down at all. Every time they arrest people for a t-shirt, they ban them from the city centre. But as soon as that goes in front of a sheriff, that bail condition is vaporized. It's cancelled. And at the same time, the authorities are really having second thoughts. One other thing that seems to me to have changed things up here is that we managed a couple of weeks ago to force, very much against his will, he held out for 22 months of genocide, but we forced the First Minister up here, John Swinney, who's a terrible record of anti-Palestine and pro-Israeli activism, but with a few emollient words to try and cover it. He has now started to criticize the Israeli genocide, call it genocide, and damn it in no uncertain terms. That hasn't stopped the Scottish Government continuing with investments in arms companies that facilitate the genocide. So I think we've got a bit of a crisis of will, of confidence in some of the authorities up here that suggest that the level of defiance, absolutely, I mean, above anywhere else emanating from London, but the level of defiance is giving them pause for thought. And I think that's the main point I would take away from the last few weeks, the last couple of months, that if we organize, if we are determined, if we stick together, if we try to maximize the numbers of people acting in defiance, then I think there's a real strong possibility of winning. Over the last 22 months of genocide, a lot of people have been active, have been out on the streets, but there's been terrible depression. There's been a feeling that whatever we do, the terrible crimes just get even worse and worse and worse. Now I think we can begin to see the possibility of breaking this government's will, of mounting a sufficiently strong campaign of defiance on this issue that we can actually win this one. So I hope I'm sure this webinar tonight will be a contribution towards that. But having been on trial for 17 of the last 19 years, having been on bail for 17 of the last 19 years, we tend to win. And you win when you're determined and you fight back. To sit in the sheriff courts is to see a procession of broken people, working class people who just get processed, and they don't have the opportunity or the ability to fight back. But we do. And when we fight back, we have every chance of winning. And I say this, of course, only facing only ever having been in jail for a few days or a few weeks, and not facing the terrible isolation and jail time of some of the Palestine Action comrades. But their determination is not in vain. They are inspiring people. They're inspiring lots of people. The numbers are having deteriorated over the 22 months. Numbers at demonstrations and events are beginning to grow. And I think there is an awareness now that to repeat some of what the previous speaker said, that Starmer can't ignore a bloody war. That he is so monstrous and such a monstrous figure that the issue of Palestine is not just fused with free speech, but it's fused with the wider war, the wider appetite for war by this government, and the catastrophe that's been visited upon the people of Gaza and Palestine. A lot of people are beginning to think could be visited upon many people, perhaps even including ourselves. So when we fight for the Palestinians, we fight for ourselves. And I look forward to listening to the other speakers in this excellent webinar.
Thank you very much, Mick. There are now more than 205 people listening to this, which is excellent. I just want to ask you a technical question that has arisen, Mick, before we start the next one, and that is: are the terror laws in Scotland synchronized with those in London, or are they different in any way?
They're pretty much the same. The behaviour is different. Some of our people, I was very surprised to learn down in England, they get put on bail without even being charged. That's not possible up here. So the legal systems are separate, but there isn't a huge difference between them.
Well, I think what you described is the result of the total mess that the system is in, and the confusion that they have sown themselves.